This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. To pre-order Aetherdrift, use my link in the description. Hi everyone, I'm Nitsa Hone, and in this video I'm continuing with my Aetherdrift Limited set review. So far I've covered every card in the main set, but as has been the case for a while now, the set also has 10 special guests that can appear in play boosters. These cards are super rare, appearing in like 1% of boosters, so you won't see them that often, but it's not impossible either. When I evaluate each of these cards, I'm going to use a letter grade system to sum up my thoughts on them. If you're unsure of what my letter grades mean, there is a guide in the description. Also, I want to remind you that there are some set review related perks for becoming a channel member or a patron, like a spreadsheet with all of my grades. You can find out how to do both of those things in the description. Alright, let's dive in with a look at Aetherdrift's special guests, starting with Cavalier of Dawn, which for 2 generic and 3 white is a 4/6 elemental knight with vigilance. When it enters, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token. When this creature dies, return target artifact or enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. Triple white can be a little challenging, but you get a really nice body and a couple of good triggers. The enters trigger can be used to effectively downgrade your opponent's best non-land permanent, but you can also go after your own non-land permanent if you have something expendable, and getting a 3/3 sounds good to you. The dies trigger will have plenty of artifacts to get back in the format. While the mana cost holds it back, this is going to generate a 2-for-1 at least most of the time, and sometimes it'll feel even better, giving it an A-. Next up, it's Thoughtcast, which for 4 generic and a blue is a sorcery with affinity for artifacts. Draw 2 cards. So if you can cast this for 2 or less consistently, it feels pretty good. Just being divination, in other words 3 mana, isn't a complete disaster either, and this format does have enough artifacts to reduce the cost on this a decent amount. That said, not all blue decks will be so into artifacts that they can play this, so it probably needs a build around grade. It's probably a D in a lot of blue decks, and a B- in a deck that can cast it for 2 or less, somewhat consistently. Next up, it's Whir of Invention, which for X and 3 blue is an instant with Improvise. That means your artifacts can help cast it. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1 generic. Search your library for an artifact card with mana value X or less, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. It's very hard to make this work in Limited. You not only need lots of artifacts in play, you also need one in your deck worth tutoring into play, not to mention a bunch of mana. And the work you have to do to make this search something up just isn't worth it for most artifacts in Limited. It was bad last time we saw it, which was an original Kaladesh, and that was also an artifact set, so I think it's just an F. Next up, it's Bone Miser, which for 4 generic and a black is a 4/4 zombie wizard. Whenever you discard a creature card, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Whenever you discard a land card, add 2 black. Whenever you discard a non-creature non-land card, draw a card. Discarding is a significant theme in this set, although it is the most concentrated in blue-red. There are lots of cards in black that have cycling. So building around this and getting amazing value actually seems doable. It's probably a D in most black decks, but a B in a deck with enough ways to discard. Next up, it's Lord of the Undead, which for 1 generic and 2 black is a 2/2 zombie. Other zombie creatures get +1/+1, and you can pay 1 generic and a black and tap it to return a zombie card from your graveyard to your hand. There are zombies in this format, but it's not like a huge theme or an archetype or anything like that. So this doesn't have like a super high ceiling like it would in a very zombie-centric format, like an Innistrad set or something. Instead, it has a pretty low floor, where it's just like a Grey Ogre, and it has an okay ceiling. I do think most black decks probably end up with enough zombies, like 3 or 4, that playing this is okay. But I also don't think most black decks are going to have so many zombies that this is anything special, so I think it's a C. Next up, it's Chandra's Ignition, which for 3 generic and 2 red is a sorcery. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to each other creature and each opponent. It takes some setup, and it's not quite as good as the similar Waltz of Rage from Duskmourn, but it's still pretty strong. You will be able to make this into a Wrath effect that benefits you more than your opponent, although the setup is significant. And if you cast this when your opponent has mana up, there's a very real chance you get blown out. And, frequently you just don't have a big enough creature for this to do what you want it to, but it is strong enough to be a B+. Next up, it's Galvanic Blast, which for 1 red mana is an instant. It deals 2 damage to any target, and it deals 4 damage instead if you control 3 or more artifacts. So Shock is already great in Limited. It's like a B- in virtually every Limited format because you can easily trade up, and you can even do direct damage to your opponent. And this has the upside of being a better lightning bolt, and it's accessible upside in this Limited format. I mean, don't expect to be doing that on like turn 3. By the mid to late game, having Metalcraft definitely seems doable. This looks great, giving it a B+. Next up, it's Pathbreaker Ibex, which for 4 generic and 2 green is a 3/3 goat. When it attacks, creatures you control gain trample and get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So, the turn you play this, it's going to feel real bad. You're spending 6 on a way below rate creature, and your opponent is likely to be able to attack into it pretty effectively or even remove it for like 2 or 3 mana. If you're not already ahead or at least at parity, that probably means you just lose. But if you get to untap, it can turn lots of boards lethal, and it even buffs itself to a 6/6 trampler at a minimum. Problem is, you not only have to cross your fingers and hope you make it to your next turn, you also need a reasonably built out board for this to be a meaningful effect. Overall, I think that makes it a C+. It's a very swingy card. There are definitely games that it's going to win, but there are going to be games where it loses the person who plays it the game too. Next up, it's Chrome Mox, which for 0 is an artifact. When it enters, you may exile a non-artifact, non-land card from your hand, and it taps to add 1 mana of any of the exiled card's colors. This card's really strong in a lot of formats, but Limited is not one of them. It's generally not worth 2 for 1ing yourself for a mana advantage, especially because said mana advantage is really only going to feel good in the early game. If you draw this late, it feels pretty terrible, and even if you draw it in the mid game, it doesn't usually feel particularly good. I know the set is an artifact set, and a 0 mana artifact is kind of exciting, but this 0 mana artifact doesn't really do anything, and in fact actively can help you lose the game because of card disadvantage, so I think it's just an F. And our last card is Sky Sovereign Console Flagship, which for 5 generic is a legendary vehicle. It's a 6/5, it's got flying. When it enters or attacks, it deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls, and it has crew 3. This was a bomb last time we saw it, and it might be even better in this format since vehicles are an even bigger focus than they were in Kaladesh block. It comes down and bolts something and continues to bolt stuff every time it attacks. It quickly decimates the opponent's board while smashing in for 6 at a time. There's no way that's not a bomb. I'm giving it an A. So those are the special guests. In the next video, I'll be taking a look at each of the color pairs and what they want to do in this format. In other words, it'll be an archetype guide. If you want to make sure you catch that video, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. If you want to catch up on the rest of the set review, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. Thanks for watching.